Pondering Pyongyang, next on International Focus.
The Institute of World Affairs at UWM and Milwaukee Public Television present International Focus, a global magazine linking Wisconsin and the world.
Welcome to International Focus. I'm Robert Ricigliano, Director of the Institute of World Affairs at UWM. As North Korea celebrated its 61st anniversary recently, the Obama administration and others searched for ways to bring the regime back to table to discuss its nuclear program. In a letter to the head of the UN Security Council, Pyongyang said it was prepared for both dialogue and sanctions, adding that if sanctions stayed in place, it would respond by bolstering what it termed our nuclear deterrence. Toward that end, they announced they had nearly completed a process that would provide a second source of weapons-grade nuclear material. At the same time, however, the government recently freed 2 American TV journalists and 5 South Korean citizens it had detained, restarted talks with South Korea on reunification of families, and normalized traffic into an industrial park run jointly with the South. North Korean diplomats also visited New Mexico Governor Bill Richardson in Santa Fe to press their case for direct bilateral talks with Washington. To help us sort out these seemingly conflicting signals from Pyongyang, we're pleased to be joined in the studio by Ho, professor of political science at UWM, whose research interests include Asian politics and international conflict. We're also joined by phone by Seongho Sheen, professor in the Graduate School of International Studies at Seoul National University and currently a visiting fellow at the Brookings Institution. Welcome to International Focus.
Hello.
Professor Sheen, I wonder if I can start with you. As we said in the intro, it's difficult to make sense of what often seem like conflicting actions on the part of the North Korean government. And I'm wondering if you could start us off by giving your perspective on how you read these various signals that we're seeing in their behavior.
Yeah, simply speaking, they always try to negotiate in the position of strength. So having done all kinds of missile tests and nuclear tests, I think they think it's up for them to negotiate, but only on their terms. So they are sending more strong signal in a way to have a better negotiation from their side. So I think that's what this conflicting signal is about at the moment.
So if negotiations, or at least improving their position in negotiations, is at least the near-term goal for them, what is it then they hope to accomplish in those negotiations? How do they see that as helping them?
Of course, we still have to wait and see until actual negotiation happens. And that means when this Ambassador Bosos may meet the North Korean delegation, either in Pyongyang or in maybe Beijing, also place. Anyway, then at that time they will say what they want. But it's been known that North Korea basically always they say they want United States to give up its hostile policy towards North Korea. Yet at the same time, they want also some kind of economic aid. And of course, the key question is if that's if the conditions are met, whether they are willing to give up the nuclear weapon. That's still many people are very unclear about it.
There are those, the skeptics of negotiations who would say North Korea has had a history of not implementing or complying with agreements that it's made, and so they feel negotiations really are unwarranted or would be unlikely to be successful. How do you see the purpose from, say, the West and China and Japan's and South Korea's interests? What counsel would you give them in entering those negotiations? What do you think they have to gain?
From the parties involved in the region, yes, as you said, such as South Korea or China or even Japan, one obvious positive outcome of this continuing engagement with North Korea is the stability in the region. They don't want North Korea to go, merely full nuclear, which is not the case at the moment. They think, even though North Korea say yes, they tested twice, but that doesn't mean they completed all of their nuclear capability. So under the circumstances, still they want to stabilize the situation. They don't want to provoke North Korea into really the confrontational manner. So that's the one purpose of, I think, continuing engagement with North Korea. And eventually, hopefully, if they can, come out with this the deal with North Korea, that will be good. But that's really up in the air. No one knows whether eventually negotiation could lead to a complete dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program.
How about the relationship among those primary partners, China, Japan, South Korea, the United States? Much has been made of China being a bit obstructionist in helping those negotiations go forward. Do you feel that they have more or less a united front or common interest in those talks with the North, or are there still significant disagreements between them?
I think in recent days, there is a more united front among those parties involved, especially from the China. I mean, basically China agreed to this UN resolution, providing a sanction, a more severe sanction than before, so that as a result, and recently there has been kind of bad blood between the China and North Korea, which is supposed to be the closest ally. And in that circumstances, of course, South Korea is totally quite on board with the United States, and Japan is the same case. So I think that also could be the one factor that led to the North Korea's, making more reconciliatory gesture recently, because they are facing really kind of united front or united sanction by those parties involved.
If we look at some of the individual moves that North Korea has made, do you see them all as sort of negotiation ploys, so to speak, or is there merit or significance to each of them individually? And particularly, I'm interested in its moves vis-a-vis South Korea in terms of talks about reunification of families and the industrial park. Are those signs of progress, or is that sort of really just a ploy?
It's still early to tell, but I will be rather cautious, because it's been the case in the past that has been some kind of reconciliation between the two parties, but things always could go again back to zero or even worse. So, and in this case, I think one of the main reasons maybe possibly for North Korea to come up with this another peaceful gesture is maybe they need some kind of cash badly, facing this international sanction against its own regime. So so far, recently what they have suggested or proposed to South Korea is resuming this Kumgang Mountain project, or getting into this Kaesong industrial, resuming the Kaesong industrial project, which has been kind of important cash cow for the North Korea. So I would see this still as a rather tactical move, rather than kind of strategic change in their mindset towards South Korea.
Also, there's been a bit made about the potential succession to one of Kim Jong-il's sons,
right.
Kim Jong-un, if I get that correct, his youngest son.
Right.
And some have speculated that these moves are more tied to that succession process or trying to anticipate it. I'm wondering how you see or what you feel about that factor.
Yeah, in fact, since the health problem of Chairman Kim Jong-il last summer, there has been lots of speculation about the succession process, right? But then recently, the Kim Yong-nam, number 2 man in the North Korea, had an interview with the Japanese media after this landmark election, in which he said, no, there will be no discussion about succession in North Korea. Kim Jong-il is the leader. He will be the leader for the future. So it seems that maybe ironically, why the North Korea has been recently changed their attitude towards the outside world is that maybe Kim Jong-il's the regime has been more stabilized. In other words, the Kim Jong-il regime has more confidence about Kim Jong-il's health and his personal position. And in fact, during the last President Clinton's visit to Pyongyang, the outside world saw Kim Jong-il, and yes, he looked a little bit thinner than before, but many saw that his health looks okay. I mean, he had this bad stroke maybe last summer, but the signs they interpret it as he's recovering from that kind of bad rehab in the past. So maybe the succession issue is again there has been lots of speculation, but maybe that's not really happening. I mean, in the behind the scene, there might be some kind of step they're taking, but officially, the North Korean media and they say there is no succession discussion going on.
It's interesting in that the stronger Kim Jong-il's position may be, the more likely success in negotiations may be when there are many people who are not wishing that his position get stronger. I'm wondering, there are those that criticize the Obama administration and former President Clinton for his visit on that grounds, feeling like it gave Kim Jong-il more legitimacy than he should be granted.
Right.
How do you see the impact of that visit?
No, from the very beginning of President Obama, even during his campaign process, he made it clear that he is willing to talk with the North Korean regime. That means the regime with Kim Jong-il in it. So, and Secretary Clinton recently during her attending at the Asia Regional Forum Conference, she made also clear they want to change North Korean behavior. They don't want to change the North Korean regime. So I think as long as Kim Jong-il or whether any other leaders in North Korea is willing to give up their nuclear weapon, then I think this administration will be okay, or they're more than willing to negotiate or normalize their relationship with North Korean regime.
We have about a minute or so left, and I want to ask one other question, which is, you spend a lot of your time observing the North from the South. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the feeling in the South about the North, both in terms of the negotiations and the relationship, but also just generally about the behavior, how the people in the South view the behavior of the North.
Yeah, I think the South Koreans, in this case, the South Korean, when I see the general public mood towards North Korea, and they have been very, in a way, rational. They know, they understand North Korean Kim Jong-il regime is bad. I mean, they're in bad in terms of human rights record, in terms of domestic and political and economic situation. The regime is not very positive and constructive in managing its own situation. There's no doubt about it. Yet at the same time, the South Korean public has been very realistic that simply there is no other way that they have to live with this North Korean neighbors. And in that case, they want to have a very stable condition in North Korea, given all the South Korea's also its own problem with economic crisis and all the matters. So they want to have a stable relationship with North Korea, but yes, yet at the same time, and they had hope that the past sunshine engagement with North Korea will really improve the things between the two countries. But after this second nuclear test by the North, they are also they're realizing that North Korea they cannot have a very optimistic, naive view on North Korea's bad intention.
Right.
So they are very much concerned and cautious about North Korean tactic and strategy. Yet at the same time, they think it's best for South Korea to manage the relationship with North Korea in a rather stable manner.
Great. Professor Seongho Sheen from Seoul National University and a fellow at the Brookings Institution, thank you for joining us by phone. To our viewers, we'll be back on International Focus in just a moment.
Thank you.
The Institute of World Affairs presents our community with a range of public programs relating to global issues, U.S. foreign policy, and the world economy. For more information about the Institute of World Affairs, call 414-229-3220 or visit our website at www.iwa.uwm.edu.
Welcome back to International Focus. I'm Robert Ricigliano. We're talking about North Korea, and we were joined in the first half of the show by a professor from Seoul National University, and we're joined in the studio now by UW-Milwaukee professor Seongho Sheen. I'm wondering if you had any thoughts or reflections on what you heard from Professor Sheen.
Sure. Actually, I agree with some of his assessment that North Korea has stability issues, and also South Korea is concerned, and superpowers surrounding the peninsula is concerned about the issue. And also North Korea has this needs of cash, and the Kaesong Industrial Park has been the cash cow for them. And with the pass of the UN Security Council Resolution 1874, they are under the dire need of cash and capital needs. So they need to cope with the recent difficulties. At the same time, they want to make sure that they have a domestic stability and also domestic political issues addressed to the people, because they have recently experienced agricultural difficulties and famines again. So they have food shortages. On top of that, economic difficulties from the sanctions from the UN. So they need to deal with these issues. At the same time, their leader Kim Jong-il's health issue has popped up. So all these issues created a huge problem for them, and they are trying to sort out. And they might have mixed views on how to deal with that as well.
Well, it's interesting. We were talking a little bit before the show, and I had said, this perennial process of trying to make sense out of seeming conflicting behavior on the North Korean side, and your response was, well, maybe it doesn't make sense. Because we seem to be in this almost like catch-22, where the North, when they need something, will engage with the South and with the U.S. and others, but they don't want to do that out of a perception that they need anything. So it puts you in this quandary. How do you both make sense of it, and how do you deal with it?
See, the reason is that North Korea has always criticized the United States, and it has been their enemy and American imperialist. So they had that public propaganda to the people, and now they need help, and now they need to change that approach. So if you notice that after Bill Clinton left, there was a report that about 50,000 Korean young boys cried. And that kind of political shows they put out. So they always send...
I'm assuming this was an engineered display to show that the crying was out of showing to give a positive signal or positive image of the United States. Okay.
They always, whatever the reason was, I would say the Kim Jong-il administration or Kim Jong-il regime felt close to the Clinton administration because during the Clinton administration, their relationship was the best. If you recall, Cho Myung-nok, Kim Jong-il's special envoy, visited the U.S., and State Secretary Madeleine Albright visited Pyongyang, and President Clinton himself considered the visit. So there was a close ties, and they felt that, and I believe that the reason they used this hostage of two American journalists was, in some ways, to induce this kind of things, although that strategy might have occurred after that incident.
Well, then there were those that criticized the visit somewhat because they felt that would just encourage North Korea to, whether it was to take someone else hostage or to misbehave in some other way. Is there any way of breaking that behavior, or are we just basically going to have to be accustomed to that if we're going to deal with North Korea?
I don't believe that we have any way to break that or quote-unquote tame them, because we have very little control over them. If you notice that the USA or other countries, they provide only so much. In many ways, China might be the only one who can quote-unquote control or have significant influence. But given the geopolitical location, China does not want to see the collapse of North Korea. North Korea, in some ways, plays the role of buffer zone. And also, if North Korea collapses, there will be the influx of a huge number of refugees and borderline issues, and they do not want to deal with that. At the same time, China does not want to see North Korea develop nuclear weapons, because that may lead to the nuclear domino in the region. Taiwan may try to, South Korea may do that, Japan is likely to join, and so they do not want to do that. So it's a dilemma for China as well. But what changed most recently is, as Professor Sheen pointed out, China supported the UN resolution, and Resolution 1874 passed with the approval and support of China and Russia. So North Korea, I believe that, felt pressure and fear.
So does that really set that round of sanctions or that resolution apart from previous ones where people would say, well, yeah, it would be, they'd make a political display out of it, but long term it really didn't do anything. Do you think 1874 actually is changing the psyche in the North?
Oh, I do. Actually, after the first nuclear test, the resolution 1714 was passed, but before it was really implemented, North Korea came back to the six-party talks, and it wasn't really implemented. So we didn't really have a chance to see how it works, but this time China joined, and also it has been implemented. And as far as I'm concerned, about 8 North Korean companies are under regulations because of the resolution. And also, recent case of North Korean ship traveling to the Southeast Asia, but couldn't find any seaport that they could be refueled, and they had to return. That's a good example. And they start feeling the pressure and start feeling the sanction, and they started need help.
I want to project us forward a bit and say, well, let's assume that the regime in the North is not going to collapse because South and China have too much at stake to let that happen. If there's going to be a political then process of transformation, how do you envision that's going to happen? I mean, in the sense that Kim Jong-il prizes his position among almost anything else, but he would think that a transition would threaten that position. So are we likely to see a political transition? And if so, what do you think has to happen to get there? What are the steps?
What do you mean by political transition?
Well, that there would somehow be a move toward true reunification of the North and the South, that they would no longer be at war, that economically and politically there would be some sort of integration. Is that I mean, in the U.S., you know, we want things to happen in weeks or days. How likely is that process to happen in the short term versus a very long term sort of slow approach?
I believe that it all depends on how power succession occurs. The U.S. government used to have a conceptual operation plan called the 5029. It's for the massive immigration or influx of refugees going to North Korea and North Korean regime, what the U.S. forces in Korea would do. And now, now Washington is trying to have more detailed plans. So if the regime collapses, and especially that was pushed because of Kim Jong-il's health. And the succession issue never surfaced until Kim Jong-il had a stroke and his health issue was known to the outside of North Korea. And now he realized that that health issue and pushing succession issue explicitly puts them in a difficult spot. And also it may lead him to quote-unquote lame duck, although given the type of regime, it's unlikely, but that may lead to the weakened power of himself. And with that, as Professor Sheen pointed out, they are trying to negotiate with other countries that there's no succession issue, their regime is stable, and they try to act like business as usual.
Well, but there are some who have speculated that Kim Jong-il is actually trying to plan not necessarily for the succession, but for his legacy, in the sense that is this? I mean, many leaders, when they're seeing the end of their time in office come, will begin to think about the future and saying the one thing they want to accomplish, they want to get the one big thing done, and that would be in this way a more normal relation, perhaps, with the South. Do you think that plays into Kim Jong-il's thinking?
I don't really think so. It would be more like a political point of view that right now he needs help, and South Korea has been an important source of capital and other types of aid. And with the Lee Myung-bak administration, South Korea's approach to North Korea has changed, and they have not been as quote-unquote friendly as the previous government in terms of providing aid. And they seem to have principles. So they want more tit-for-tat approach. And North Korea does not want to comply to that approach, but at the same time, they need to deal with their needs. I believe that's the reason that they send mixed signals to both Washington and Seoul.
So it may not actually be a long-term strategy here.
I don't think so.
So we have about a minute left. How do you see the next, say, 6 months going forward with the relations with the North?
North Korea will continue to try to push and have a bilateral talk with Washington and try to get more help and support from Washington. At the same time, they will use that as a leverage to show that we have other means. So in order to deal with North Korea, synchronized action in Washington and Seoul is critical because North Korea will try to play a game between these three countries, and unless Washington and Seoul play together as a unitary actor, there will be a problem, and North Korea will try to take advantage of that.
Great. Professor Okhyo, thank you so much. Ok is here at UWM, and we're proud to have you.
My pleasure.
To our viewers, we'll see you next week on International Focus.
For information about the Institute of World Affairs and its many programs, or to become a member of the Institute, call 414-229-3220 or visit us at our website,